Hello everyone and welcome to a very special episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today I'm absolutely delighted to bring to you an all-star panel. These are people who I've spoken to over the last couple of months, years in some cases, talking about something that's very, very personal to all of us, but something which I think is a great opportunity out there in the marketplace. I've been in the industry for 20 years in the financial technology space plus, and over that time there's never been more of a strain on talent. We keep talking about the war on talent. It's been something that's been trotted out for years and years and years, but there's a real, with digitalization, rapid digitalization happening over the last couple of years, we're seeing more and more companies desperately searching for talent within it. At the same time, we're seeing this contradiction with numerous different people struggling to find and get into work and follow their path. I've got 4 people in front of us now who are doing amazing things about making sure that that's leveled up, creating real opportunities for people from all sorts of different backgrounds to come into it. We will do some brief introductions now, take you around the room and introduce you to some brilliant people who are doing some amazing things. I'm going to start with you, please, Mohammad.
Thanks, Toby. Really pleased to be here with all of you. So I'm Professor Mohammad. I'm the Dean of Royal Dock School of Business and Law, based at University of East London. And in the past couple of years, we have introduced a number of courses, both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels in FinTech, moving from computing to business and finance and economics to the legal sector.
Thank you very much indeed. Over to you, Matthew.
Hi, Toby. Hi, everybody. My name's Matthew Chung. I am CEO of a FinTech firm called iPushPull. Previous to that, I had a FinTech firm called Rand Squawk. So that's kind of one hat that I wear of being a FinTech entrepreneur for the last 20 odd years. The other hat that I wear is in the last 2 years or so, I started mentoring quite heavily with high school students, college students, university students, and talking to kind of young people who are from kind of underrepresented backgrounds was very important for me. I started doing that as a personal thing, and that's kind of snowballed into something else, which my other hat that I'm wearing is I'm co-founder of a project called Work in FinTech, where we're helping young people get into FinTech and Web3 and see all of those opportunities there, and also helping employers find good talent that's diversified across every kind of race, gender, and socioeconomic background.
Fantastic. And I was struck when I spoke to you about this, that mirrored across the pond, there's a very similar sort of movement coming in there, and great pleasure to introduce you to Joel. Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to completely copy what Matthew said. I remember connecting with Matthew like 6 months ago, and him explaining what he does, and me just saying, oh, I do the exact same thing just in the United States. So I co-founded Viable EDU, which is a FinTech-focused remote learning and professional development program where we partner with companies to customize the education and skills training that we can provide to not only their employees, but also to prospective employees as well. And we found that going virtual allows us to expand our reach and allow substantially more access for financial literacy, and more particularly for FinTech education for those that may not have had that access prior. And through this partnership-based model, as opposed to a tuition-based model, we've allowed to maintain this structure by having the companies pay for the education and training of this next generation of individuals that will be joining into finance. So to not add to any high student loans, and just to continue to democratize financial literacy and financial education even more. Thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's finish off with Ian Bagshaw. Ian, welcome.
Just starting a second career, decided to retire from the first one to do something with a bit more purpose. So chairman of a talent nurturing business called Zero Gravity. Aim is to really accelerate careers of highly talented but low income background kids in the UK through sponsorship, through to good uni, good jobs, and then get them to pay it forward and pay it back, as part of the process to build a bigger community, like-minded individuals that drive each other on.
Fantastic. And I think what's exciting me about having these conversations with all 4 of you over the past few months is that deep and rooted at the centre of this is a realisation that despite these challenges, there's a massive untapped talent pool out there. And there's access and accessibility that we can dramatically improve to find a whole new generation of people that can really take the industry forward to bigger, better and brighter things. And each of you are coming at it from slightly different angles, but it's led with a a talent-led process which massively increases accessibility and diversity and brings a whole new pool of people into the industry. Let's start, Matthew, with you. Talk to me about how this talent-led approach and this improved focus on diversity within the space can open up a whole new talent pool as well. Tell us your story, because I think that's an interesting point to start with.
Yeah, sure. My story was I went to a very mediocre state school where there was no careers development whatsoever. I think in my school, there was, the 100, 150 odd that was in my year. Maybe 3 of them went to university or 5 of them, like something pretty small. I'm also the son of 2 immigrants. So neither of my parents had any sort of network that I could tap into to get my kind of first leg up. So I kind of created one myself through work experience when I was at school. I ended up doing it at the local stockbrokers because I always wanted to be a trader. After that, though, I ended up continuing that work experience, going back there every school holiday for the next kind of 4 or 5 years or so. And on the back of that, ended up one of the people I was working with gave me a few different names to speak to the people in the city. And that was the door opened for me and the first step through that. One thing that obviously we've seen in the last 2 years or so is there's been a lot of young people that have not had the ability to have work experience. And from that means that they're missing the actual experience itself, but they're also missing that on their CV. So when they're going to try and get a job in, 2-3 years time when they might finish their A-levels, or if they go to university, there's going to be some gaps on there. So that's the kind of one thing that work in FinTech, what we're doing is kind of solving for, is helping provide work experience to young people and so on. But in terms of this kind of talent gap and talent shortage, so I guess I can look at this from 2 ways. One, from my own experience and how I had no one kind of telling me or showing me what to do. I just kind of did it the hard way. And that's one of the reasons I do a lot of mentoring, because I don't think shortcuts is the right word, but there's just more accelerated ways that you can get from A to B without having to go the kind of, the long windy road, because there's a well-trodden path if you know what you're doing and someone has told you how to do it or shown you how to do it or opened up a network of interesting and helpful people to help you. So I think that the talent gap piece from one side, on that, particularly on the socioeconomic background piece, that is something where there's a lot of opportunities that are just not there for that kind of group of people. And what you find is there's a big overlap between the lower socioeconomic group and probably some of those other groups that is mentioned in the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. So I think that's one thing which has been good in the last couple of years, where people's eyes are opened a lot more around. You've had obviously the Me Too and the woke and all the kind of the Black generation things that happened in the last couple of years, which has come to the forefront. So it's been forced upon people, but more importantly, forced upon companies to look at things in a different way, which is great, because then you can start looking at, there's actually these massive, and I know probably Ian and others are going to talk about these massive pools of talent that never even sees the light of day, because they didn't go to Red Brick University, or they didn't get that shot when someone else had it, or they had a big knockdown and they had no one to help them bounce back again, and they ended up doing something else that they were never quite suited for. So I think the world is slowly aligning and realigning to help those people. And I think some of the things, we were talking before this, Joel, Mohammad, Ian and myself, we're all trying to solve this from different perspectives. But that talent gap, I think there's the other bit. I'll kind of pass over the baton. But the other side with my other hat on is as a FinTech CEO. And as you know, Toby, in your industry doing recruitment, there's lots of demand for people to work in FinTech, particularly in developers, but also all the other job roles. And there's very few people that are filling it. All that happened in a typical market, obviously the price and salaries of developers has gone through the roof. An entry-level developer is now, 40 with no experience and 60 with 2 years experience, and goes on and on. And if you went back 20 years ago, what developers was probably on 20 grand salary when they started, and they were designing web pages. So it's kind of, that's all evolved. But as a FinTech CEO, it's hard to find good people to recruit them, and also to stay competitive against the Googles and the Amazons and Coinbase and all the cool companies out there because they have the money to pay very high salaries. But again, all that's happened, it's fallen back into that vicious circle where if you're to justify having this really high salary, then I'm going to go Oxford, Cambridge, computer science, first class degree. Oh yeah, we'll take that person. It's like, okay, what about all these other people over here? So I'll kind of stop there because I think, everyone else in this call's probably got a lot to say on that too.
Absolutely, yeah. And let's move over to Mohammad. To follow up on that. One of the things I think that's been key to the University of East London is to give people work-ready solutions and to increase that sort of scale of knowledge as to what Matthew was just alluding to. This sort of knowledge of what sort of job and opportunity there are out there within that. And I know diversity has been at the very heart of what UEL has always been about as well. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts.
Thank you. So I think you mentioned about diversity. And if you are looking for that sort of talent, you would always go to the source. So in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of companies coming to us for recruitment. The problem sometimes I see is that they come to us looking at diversity as a challenge rather than an opportunity and what benefit and advantages they can bring. And I know before this pre-meeting, we were talking about how artificial intelligence is built into the recruitment system. And there have been reports on the bias where they have actually been filtering out applicants from low-ranking institutions such as ours. And actually that doesn't help because then the few applications you see on your desk would always be from certain elite institutions and so on and so forth. So where we get students who may be the first one in their families to come to a university, don't have the social capital, Matthew, that you were talking about earlier, then how do we build and help and recruit them? Now, of course, there's a role that we can play as an institution. We have got mental wealth module, which provide them with that practical experience and so on and so forth. But what's important is that universities become part of the ecosystem. An example of 5 of us here on how do we provide that opportunity to the students? How do we make sure that there are mentors from across the board coming to the source? It's more about pull rather than a push strategy, to the source, visiting lecturers, mentoring hours, providing them with internship opportunities. When you're talking about salaries and jobs, the recent report by CFTE mentioned that most FinTech jobs require 2 to 3 years experience. Now, these lads coming out of the institution would never have that 2 to 3 year experience in the area of FinTech. So how do we enhance those paid internships? Nearly everyone, not nearly, all our students do some kind of part-time job. I mean, they're normally shelving or working in a restaurant, etc. What can the FinTech industry do to provide them with those part-time job opportunities, perhaps ring-fenced around students and so on and so forth? So I think there's a lot we could do as universities start to become part of the ecosystem, and there are problems and challenges from both sides.
Oh, the challenge is there. This is the sort of thing which encourages you to start these sort of ventures. You see that the sort of vice-like grip on how talent can come into industry. Tell us a little bit about what shook you to start your business and how you're helping companies overcome this and talent overcome this and get that increase that accessibility at the same time.
So sorry, Toby, you called on me, right? It cut out.
I did, yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll
cut that in. We'll cut that in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, companies struggle a lot with internal learning and development because a lot of the time the onus falls on human resources. And when it comes to customizing an educational approach to providing the baseline knowledge and skills to not only navigate through a company as a current employee, but also to be able to be identifiable new talent for these companies, it's a missing piece for them. In terms of bridging that educational gap and also identifying talent, and more particularly diverse talent, that's where we can come in and really be that pipeline directly in. And Mohammad, I agree with you completely that we have to rethink this years of experience, extremely antiquated way of thinking. And there are ways that we can approach this. We can approach it immediately, and in my opinion, we can do it virtually as well. There are a ton of clever virtual professional development angles that you can take to provide not only individual skills-based development, but also team-based skills development. And what we've found through our structure is that since we do everything live and since there are cohorts the size of 15, 20, 25, sometimes 30 students, it allows for more of a communal-based learning as opposed to, hey, watch this video, take this quiz, and now you're certified. And in doing so, it allows us to match students not only with others that are interested in similar areas of the market, but we bake into the structure of this program having students discuss and explain these structures to their peers. And we found that that is the best way for people to learn, is the actual discussion as opposed to any sort of quiz grade or assignment that's submitted. Not saying that those don't show what individuals should be focusing on strengthening, but we think that consolidated approach to financial education and doing it virtually can provide these students with that next level of knowledge and skills to then be ready for an interview and to be ready to start at a company where they're not playing catch up the entire time.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because this concept of reimagining a system and trying to sort of change the face of generations of how this is how we've always done it, I think is critical to getting people into it. Ian, I know that this has been a big driver for you and something you're very, very passionate about taking a system that's in many ways fractured and starting something which you think is going to be a genuine revolution in terms of how we access undervalued talent. There is a huge wastage of talent that we're able to to suddenly start looking at in a very different way, and you've got some pioneering thoughts on how we can change that and improve things. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, to disrupt the system now that's very established, I think you need to work within it. So listening to the conversations, there's just a lot of truisms jump off the page. It's much easier to get a job on a postgraduate basis than it is to get a job as a graduate, because most elite employers delegate graduate recruitment to a department and recruit postgraduate through the division in which the person's going to work. So the irony of this is the biggest hurdle to get over is the graduate job and getting people into the right graduate job, because that gets the experience and that then allows a much more flexible recruitment process going forward. Our view of support is a combination of what everyone said, really, which is sponsorship's important. A lot of the touch points for graduates are very transactional. You get your A-level grades, you get into university, you do well at university in your second year, you get work experience. You get good work experience, you might get a good job if you prep properly for the interview. You get a good job, you might get a good career, depending on whether you get the right sponsor in the workplace. So, as a kind of decision tree working through things mathematically, kind of our business model is to take every junction and make it easier for talent to come through, make a mistake or not make a mistake, but ultimately to be hitting the ball hard when they get into the position to hit the ball hard, not to worry about are they going to return it, but just to hit it hard. So when you look at things that you need to do with talent, one is you need to sponsor it through its career, because ultimately it will be taking a leap into places which it probably never expected to go. You then need to, kind of make that talent more confident and supportive of people like it going forward. So you build a community of self-help, a bit like what Joel's saying. I'm a huge fan of peer-peer learning, but imagine peer-to-peer sponsorship to develop careers, because this is one of the problems that I see. Everything is transactional, focused on touch points, when actually it's a continuum. And, the model's always been focused on touch points. There's always been very little support post 18 for people to make the right career moves. So our view is, that is of itself a problem. And there's no headwind here. It's not like there's any competition. There's just a huge amount of apathy driven by this is how it's always been done. Universities do academic stuff. People should magically create employability skills, and it's a test of their own resilience and entrepreneurship that they do that. So when they get into a position of making a job application, if they screw it up, it's kind of like their fault. Well, actually, that of itself is a false negative, because ultimately people need to be supported to do that. So our kind of view of this is we look at our talent horizontally across the UK, essentially by encouraging people to step forward and walk into our network. And then we're extending that network through undergraduate and postgraduate. So that once they're in, there's no reason for them to leave, because our view is it can be a freemium model in the sense that we can get the employers to pay and we can complement what goes on at university. And then once they're postgraduate, we expect, but don't obligate them to pay it back in time and pay it forward in cash contribution, because we go back to this point about higher education, which is increasingly a higher cost. And one of the things that, I find particularly attractive at the moment is, sponsorship of itself, emotional connection is great. I also think if you can start creating direct bursaries and microfinancing talent, then the confidence that generates in the individual to take a further step forward. And actually we're finding now we're raising bursaries for university kids, that actually a lot of entrepreneurs like that model, because they like the fact that they could sponsor 3 kids either from, a postcode or with a fintech interest, or, kind of from a particular learning. And then, we can introduce them to that talent nationally and make it easier for people to sponsor. Because the last thing about our business model is the biggest issue is nothing makes it easy to sponsor talent. Yeah. Nothing. And that is the wastage, because everyone's really busy and everyone makes the decisions in front of them. But actually, if you make the decisions in front of people broader and easier to sponsor talent, our view is common sense says there's nothing stopping that happening. We don't know why no one's done it, but ultimately we're going to give it a go. And actually, the more sponsorship we get, the wider the choice that people have to sponsor talent, you're naturally going to get diversity. And it's going to be on a meritocratic basis, not contrived. And I don't mean contrived negatively, but I kind of sometimes think a lot of the initiatives are too vertical. You get very vocal champions about this postcode or this ethnicity or this gender from this vintage. And before you know it, kind of the whole thing is snaking around the campaign trail. And we see this as a non-political issue, just a purpose. And our business is a very clear social purpose. And we'll make money on the way through for sure, but the primary purpose is to level it up, create opportunity, and get, the best people sponsored by the best people, because as a simple equation, that has the least prospect of failure.
I think this is something you touched on there is really interesting about the sort of cost investment into a university degree, right? And how prohibitive that is for many areas, and how much of a shackle it is that they're afterwards for many people. Yet if it's delivered into driving people the right way, and there's those connections there to say it's not just a degree for a couple of years which gives you the skill sets to to open the door, but something that then pushes you on to bigger, brighter and greater things, and has those connections and that network. We've used the word community a number of different times, and I think community is very much around certain things. You always see that MBAs are very much driven around the community and the people you'll be sharing a cohort with, as opposed to anything else. I'm really interested to hear you, because with you guys doing something very different on this, and looking at how you're able to connect with people further down the line as well, and how you're engaging with entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit about how a degree isn't just for 3 years, but it's for a lifetime with how you're setting things up.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think the most important element here is the point, whether we call it a community or an ecosystem, is how we are all engaging and adding value at the same time. So looking at universities such as University of East London, which are hugely focused on employability and have been since 1898, from the first industrial revolution up until now. Second industrial revolution up until now, and see how are we helping the labor market and the job market. So I think a good example is your own organization, Toby, because I think earlier people were talking about relationship management with the pipeline. So I think working with yourself and your colleagues, where they come to us, they talk to our student, and start that relationship at a very early stage in terms of nurturing them, coaching them about what needs to be done during their life cycle here in order to move forward. Of course, the academic side of things adds a value, which is really important. But then having that sort of relationship building element is so key. So not only we work with entrepreneurs, we've got an entrepreneur in residence scheme where entrepreneurs and other business colleagues come into the institution and help our students with their thinking, with their career, so on and so forth. We also work with a number of other organizations, like I was mentioning the FinTech boot camps we ran, and other similar events where we had companies like Amazon coming to us. We worked with Royal Barclays on how they can help our students build the skill set that are required to be in the fintech industry and another industry. So I think just an overall engagement with between higher education and businesses are important now. One aspect is engaging directly with the students and the talent pipeline, but there's another element, which is engaging with the institution itself. So again, going back to example of your organization, Toby, where your colleagues are part of our FinTech advisory board, where they are helping us design and reshape the FinTech courses as the industry is moving. That's very important, engaging with the career services of the institution, where actually the university helps the organization by filtering, doing the initial filtering job for the organization by finding and selecting the right students and then putting them forward for the institution for the recruitment purposes or placements or internship, etc. So that's important. So I think there's a clear educational model, which is around learning by doing, which is around recently launched our trading floor at the Stratford campus, where students go through simulated experience of what the real world and real trading experience would look like. But at the same time, making sure we engage with businesses and continue with that journey. And many of our students are mature students, so they have not come through the normal traditional route. And I think there's a clear resilience element there. They still already have a lot of human skills that are required, but I think they just need that opportunity provided by various organizations for the next step.
Opportunity is a big piece, and Joel, we've spoken about this, before as well. Because look, you're not necessarily looking at just young talent coming through, but you're also talking about cross-trained talent and giving people those sort of skill sets to do it. That said, there's this piece there about companies who are brave enough to give the opportunity. Everyone will talk about not having the access to the talent. Everyone will be talking about, I can't find the right people for it, but they will also be under enormous pressure not to get hiring wrong. And they're almost frozen by the need then to revert back to that original thing, to say Ivy League, red brick university profiles. I used the analogy before about, you never get sacked, you're hiring IBM. It's a similar sort of process here to do that. How do we help people become more comfortable, Joel, with bringing talent that isn't the shouting talent, that isn't the obvious sort of hire, that is it is either from a different background coming through into the business, or from an entirely different organization or background and career beforehand, transitioning over to something else and saying that this is something there which can be revolutionary for your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of mirroring what you said, these companies would be doing themselves an enormous disservice by ignoring all of these rethought ways of identifying talent. And we started with young students. We started this because COVID hit, and the students that were stuck at home, we just wanted to provide some free virtual teaching. But what we realized is that not only is this applicable to young students, but also with the growth and popularity of FinTech as a profession, there are a ton of established professionals that want to pivot in. And that's kind of the beauty of the customizability of our educational approach, is that it's applicable to really anyone, regardless of their background, regardless of their age, their prior professional experience. So we've partnered with a number of organizations that assist individuals with transitioning into FinTech or are returning back to work after some years off. And if you provide these individuals with a shot, you would be blown away with not only the volume and numbers of these individuals, but also their capabilities. And convincing companies of this, you four might disagree with me, but it actually hasn't been that hard for us. These companies are well aware that their approach to identifying talent is incredibly inefficient, and they overlook a vast amount of opportunity. And if we can come in not only as identifiers of this talent, because we're really getting to know our students, their strengths, but also their passions, their career interests, the areas they want to pursue, and we can very confidently and adequately match them with opportunities, but to provide them with this customized educational bridge directly from these companies makes the world of difference. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is, starting out as a virtual education platform, accreditation kept coming up from companies, less companies and more just standard conversations around, what school do you want to accredit the courses that you're teaching? And what we've realized, and the answer that we came to, is we actually don't think, when it comes to FinTech, that schools should be accrediting anything. It should be the companies that are actually doing the innovation and the disruption. So that's why we pursued this industry-specific focused approach to financial education that a lot of companies, when we give them that value proposition, want to jump on pretty immediately.
Ian, I can see you.
Yeah, look, I
to
think,
tag in there as well.
well, I look at it, I take Joel's point. I completely subscribe to that. But ultimately, what you've got is a classic analog marketplace, because if you look at the kind of equality, diversity and inclusion model, all businesses know that they're facing a digital transition. So the biggest, essentially diversity is to get more young people in positions of influence, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, anything, because the talent base to handle the digital transition is the younger talent base. So they can't even address how to get talented youngsters in position of influence because they can't get them into the business. So what you're then seeing is entrepreneurial spirit coming large. And I think FinTech is a good environment to discuss that in, because a lot of the success stories are very entrepreneurial, they're very relevant, and people can see and feel those success stories. So you're now getting graduates who want to be entrepreneurs. They want to miss out the first career of investment banking, of accountancy, of law, of anything blue chip and professional. So you're seeing a divergent marketplace, and there are private universities coming through, which not really universities, but they're like people like Ecole 42 in Paris, and these coding universities that are coming through now, where they are not charging talent to attend. They're basically just charging recruitment fees for talent to leave. And you can see that people have taken a view, well, actually, look, if I want truly entrepreneurial talent to come through, I'm just going to create my own university, because I don't want to kind of spend time teaching people how to teach what I want to buy. And then you've got youngsters coming through who are saying, actually, you know what, being a VP at Goldman Sachs, that may be my older brother's aim in life 10 years ago, but like, he nearly killed himself. Why would I do that when I can go straight in and work for an entrepreneur? And therefore you end up with the entrepreneurs who are willing to take the bigger risk decisions and apply their own or moderated or, kind of newer organized thought processes to recruitment. So ultimately the market's disrupting itself across top class graduates. And it's whether the elite employers can actually see this happening around them and do anything about it. Because, in a lot of ways, Joel is working with a tailwind, not a headwind, provided he sets his course for the right employer. If he wanted to reverse a lot of his talent into JP Morgan's graduate training program, then you'd go through 3 layers of people and they'd say it's a great idea, but you don't float this kind of box because you don't attend this college or you didn't get this grade, and it's all a bit of a gamble, and we'll take a gamble on X%. Because you're dealing with intermediaries who are being delegated the authority to make the hiring decision, whereas entrepreneurs essentially delegate it, or if they do delegate it, they delegate it in a different way, and they take pride in disruptive thinking. So that's why I think FinTech's an interesting example, because it's a young industry full of entrepreneurs. Spirit, full of tangible success stories. It's sexy in a lot of ways for the graduates we see, and if the blue chips aren't on the game, the graduate's going to walk straight past the blue chip, having done work experience and want to work in an entrepreneurial environment. So I think that the market's already dealing with this. It just isn't recognizing the level it's dealing with it. But I think this wave of people coming through who've seen the digital transition in COVID are going to think, actually, I don't need to wait 6-7 years to put my thumbprints on something. If someone's going to give me a go now is the right time for me to go. So the confidence we see in talent, particularly high talent, is high. And I think if you focus on the talent, not the problem, the socioeconomic problem, the diversity problem, the ethnicity problem, etc. You just focus on the talent. The right people buy that message and they'll pay up for it. And the people who won't buy that message won't pay up for it. Essentially, they're going to be the ones that are losers, and they're going to be the ones that are getting disrupted, which is what you're already seeing with traditional graduate recruitment processes. They're picking on different.
Can I add to that on the young people piece? With young people kind of coming through, that kind of starts from the top. Like, if you look in the US, and Joel, you probably know the facts better than me, but if you look at Biden, George Bush and Trump, they're all in the same year at college. So basically this aging group has continued to dominate and run the world. Because when George Bush was there, he was, 60 odd. Biden's there now and he's nearly 80 odd. It's the same group of people still running things. But that top-down kind of way of thinking, that's hinders young people who are trying to get into traditional finance. But that's where FinTech and Web3 is so much different, because you're not hindered by that, because generally people that are running these companies are young themselves. Most people are, someone who's old in a FinTech company is going to be like 40 to 50. There's not many people, if anyone, who's older than that in that particular industry. Now, looking at young people, right? So with work in FinTech, I've got 2 people on my team in work in FinTech. One is 12 and one is 17. The 12-year-old is the world's youngest crypto millionaire. He's made that through minting NFTs, and he's helping us to create an NFT collection to raise money so we can start sponsoring young people, helping them learn about FinTech and Web3. There's another lady who's 17. She's French, lives in Dubai, is doing 2 degrees, speaks 5 languages, and she's teaching me about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which is what we're going to be set up eventually as well. But I'm fully embracing these people that are super, super smart. If they want to, they are elite university material, but they don't need to do it. Why? If I'm 12 years old and I've got millions in the bank already, why do you need to go to university? And I had the conversation with his father, the 12-year-old, who's called Benjamin, and he said, well, and I agree with this, when you go to university, it's not really about the learning, it's about who you meet and how you make friends and how you grow as a person. And for me, and sorry to poo-poo academia, Mohammad, but for me, it was 90% or 95% of the university experience was the social side and is meeting people, and all that group is still my friends now. And that's something we all need to think about. Like Joel, us, Ian, we're talking about the kind of, this learning and acceleration and, doing stuff remote and digitally. Don't forget about the social side. That's so important for young people as well.
Massive. I mean, you've got the
and
biggest advert as well, Matthew, finishing off, because you look at this guy who set up checkout.com. I mean, what a job advert. I mean, that you don't need to say much more, is there? There's not a lot written about a Goldman Sachs partner or a JP Morgan managing director. And
this is
if
why
you read the article on checkout.com, I mean, that is going to lead the stampede.
They raised $1 billion at 40 billion. They're the second biggest fintech in Europe now, third biggest private fintech in the world. So they're hopefully joining our NFT program. We're talking to them at the moment. But the one thing which we haven't mentioned at all, which I think is important as well, is apprenticeships, right? Apprenticeships. The UK invented apprentices, right? We've had apprentices in the UK for 800 years. But now people see them as like, oh, why would I be an apprentice? That's for tradespeople and things where you get your hands dirty. It's like that's beginning to change slightly now. We just did an announcement with Goldman's and Warwick University doing a master's degree apprenticeship. So you've got companies like Goldman's sponsoring people doing master's degrees. And this idea of having degree apprenticeships, I think, will become more important going forward as well. And I think if you're getting big kind of tier 1 companies sponsoring things like that, that's going to help, I suppose, dilute that idea of apprenticeships being, get your hands dirty type thing. And in fact, I only learned this the other day because on this interview we did with Goldman's Warwick and Sir Peter Esterlin, who's a former Lord Mayor, he's now chair of the Association of Apprenticeships. He was actually saying half the apprentices in this country, I didn't know this, half the apprentices in this country are actually doing business and management and administrative apprenticeships rather than, probably I'm wrong in my assumptions, kind of cognitive bias. I'm thinking it's tradespeople that are doing apprenticeships. But I think that's good and that's important if we can start pushing those as well. Because a degree apprenticeship, surely that is better than a normal degree because you're getting the work experience and you're getting your certificate at the end of it. And for me, I think academia is a bit flawed because as you go through, you're specializing. You get to the end, it's like, okay, now I want to be a trader at Goldman Sachs, or I want to, be a portfolio manager at Schroders or BlackRock. If you don't get that, then you're setting yourself up to fail. And how many people are trying to be traders on the Goldman Sachs grad program? 500,000 people a year, maybe across the entire planet. So why are you trying to do that when there's this massive other sector out there with fintech and lots of other industries where you can attach yourself to a sector. If you look at financial services are combined value $16 trillion a year. FinTech combined values, and depending who you look at, is between 2 and 3, maybe 4 trillion, right? So let's call it 1.5 and 15 trillion. That's a 10x difference between the size of FinTech and the size of financial services globally. Financial services, how much do they grow each year? A couple of percent, 5%, 10% on a good year. FinTech is growing 100% every year. So there's orders of magnitude increase in the size of potential and sector and opportunity and jobs in FinTech versus financial services. So why am I going to choose to go here and work for Goldman Sachs and only earn a few million quid at my bonus at the end of the year when I could earn billions by creating a startup, creating value, creating jobs, helping people, feeding your taxes back into the economy to help more people? That's the right way to go instead of trying to go into traditional financial services. I really think that's why I'm quite passionate about it. I think young people should be looking here on FinTech and Web3, and traditional financial services has had its day.
And that's about knowledge, isn't it? That's about increasing the knowledge of where people can go and how people.
It's awareness.
Sort of
it's awareness of the
it is awareness, but you've also got to see a sea change in the mentality of talent between 18 and 21, right? Because what Matthew's talking about, Mohammad will be very eloquent on, because the biggest threat to universities generally, but particularly non-elite universities, is the rise of apprenticeship. Because as things stand in the UK now, most undergraduates have a business relationship with their university, because it's now really important that you get the right thing out of that university, because you're walking out of it with a mountain of student debt, particularly if you're coming from a socioeconomic background where you don't have a parental backstop, which is a high proportion of the talent. So what you're actually seeing with apprenticeships, is a rise of what I consider to be blue chip apprenticeships, Matthew, which are a real challenge to a traditional degree, because to the extent the employability going forward from those apprenticeships is better or more transparent than the employability from getting a degree, why would you not go down that path? And the big issue with the higher education system in the UK is the universities don't have any employability stats that they provide in relation to undergraduate courses. They operate a consistent pricing model. So, degrees are the same price wherever you do them, whatever you study, which obviously, doesn't really help a graduate unless they know, if I get this degree from this institution, am I more employable? Which is why you get this stampede to elite universities, because that's seen as a guarantee, but it's not a guarantee. And that's why I think the expansion of higher education over the last 25 years, which is one of the legacies of Tony Blair, the irony is it's actually being dismantled by his son, who set up an apprenticeship startup called Multiverse, which I find quite ironic, but maybe it's my view. But I think Mo, you must have a view on that, because these are your natural competitors now, aren't they? Essentially these are the guys who could eat your lunch.
Well, I think it's important to mention, I think apprenticeships are not a challenge, but an opportunity for universities, because in order to do an apprenticeship, you also then become part of an institution. So like we now have got hundreds of apprentices in various areas within the institution in various subject areas. So I think that's the first thing, which is really important. And I absolutely agree with you. Providing our audiences with the choice of either doing a traditional qualification or a more apprenticeship-based qualification is important, because the role of universities are both to make people employable, but then at the same time also to see how we train them and develop them so they can add value to the society through, for example, Matthew, what you're talking about, building a social capital, etc., etc. So I think that's an important aspect to all of it. But I think one thing I would, though, the challenge about the stats on employability, because under the new government record, not new, it's been there for a few years now, every course need to advertise and publish the employability stats on the website. So I think you can get like a confused.com of universities, where you can know which course and which institution provide you with what kind of employability. Now that's helpful and not helpful in many ways. And so I think that, and then clearly the pricing structure, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I know I'm here to the only one here to defend universities, but the reality is it's purely government driven, the pricing strategy. one flat rate, whatever course, whatever.
It's the only business model in the world where you could walk in and the fillet steak costs the same as a cheese sandwich from an employability perspective. You know, that's it, right? PP at Oxford costs broadly the same as geography, tier 3 university. I mean, that is bonkers. And it's no wonder, like, and all credit to institutions like UEL, where you put a business edge on it. Because the one thing I'd say before I drop is, I think universities have to step in. Otherwise, Matthew's passion play is going to divert a lot of talent away from you. Because actually, if the majority of your kids actually want to do entrepreneurial stuff as soon as they leave uni, you best drop in some entrepreneurial coaching and teaching, because that of itself is the sales spin against the competitors who are still, you know, selling the history degree, which was the same 5 years ago. You know, because in a way, you know, the days when you relied on blue chip employers to tool graduates up and then throw them into the ether, I think that's over. I just think people don't know it yet. I think Matthew knows it. That's why he's laughing. But, you know, because he's in a sexy spot, you know, and he's printing money. But also, don't forget the incentive structures in entrepreneurial organizations are really appealing at the moment, because they're kinder organizations. You get equity, you take risk, you're made to feel like an owner straight away. You go into an elite institution, you get no equity, you're paid a salary, you might get a bonus if you work really hard and are really well liked. And that's what I call the analog model. So it's no wonder that talent is rushing to this position. And what COVID's done is actually accelerated the transition to digital from analog. So people can see all the success stories. There's very few success stories of people that don't operate a digital business model. So if you're a kind of 19-year-old kid, where do you want to go? You want to go where the future is. And I think this is why a lot of you know, our talent really needs support to bridge that gap whilst doing university courses, because the universities just don't react. They're just not reacting to this. And why? Because they're not entrepreneurial. How could they react? They're academics. And why would they change? I mean, they live in a different ecosystem. And you know, and notwithstanding some of the best universities in the world bridge the gap and have shown that actually if you bridge the gap between academic and business, you can cause your alumni to be rock stars. How many universities are really trying to do that? I think it's, you know, as I said, I've just got to drop in you guys an email. I love the conversation. I think we're only just starting, actually. But, you know, I think it's great. And, you know, I'm very passionate. I'm really inspired by speaking to you all, actually. So thanks a lot from my perspective.
I agree with all of it. And to tie this all up, let's thank everyone for being involved in this conversation. It's something which clearly we could be talking about for many, many more hours alongside this. It's great to see people who've got a real purpose to doing something different within an industry. And it's clear that there's a massive opportunity. There is definitely there's a wind that's changing things in terms of how we can do things better. And there's a great opportunity to do that and to have people like yourselves who are all taking things from slightly different angles across different parts of the world and making change happen. If there's anything that you guys wanted to say to sum things up, what's the big wish that you've got for 2022 that you could say to do that before we wrap things up? Mohammed, I'll start with you. If you could change the world in 2022 with regards to what we can do with this whole process, what would that be?
I think when it comes to areas such as FinTech, I think the bigger issue is a sourcing issue rather than a recruitment issue. And within the sourcing issue, I know we have focused a lot on a certain age gap, the applicant, the 17, 18, 19-year-old. But I think there's a lot to say about the moving away from national to international level. So the Ron Khalifa report on the review of the UK FinTech, which is perhaps, you know, the biggest report that have been done in the UK, clearly identified that if London were to maintain its status of being the financial center of the world, it need to focus also on sourcing internationally, globally. And there I may use the word Brexit here, which is now having a huge effect. So I think there's some kind of policy work that needs to be, that is required. So my other hat is I'm also in the governing body of Chartered Association of Business School, which does a lot of policy work and so on and so forth. Is that how do the universities, the various organizations, and other work with immigration and other functions to make sure that we make it easier for companies to recruit people from overseas. Universities such as London universities, of course, bring a lot of that talent pool in the UK, because, you know, quite attractive to international students. So they are already here. But how do we work with the government to make companies easier to recruit that specific talent pool?
Perfect. And John?
Yeah, I had a little bit of time to think about this. The reason we started this
Mohammad
is
took the difficult one, didn't he?
Yeah. The reason we started this is to create as many opportunities as possible for those that did not have those opportunities prior. And that hasn't changed, although the way that we provide those opportunities have changed, and the growth has definitely made our company look a little bit different. That is still at the helm of really everything that we're trying to do here. So I guess my wish isn't really quantifiable. It's more, I want the mindset of how people can pursue both a career and just a literacy and understanding of finance to systemically change across the world. And I think the best way to do that is through what we've talked about on this call. So I'm thrilled to have these conversations with like-minded people as well that are trying to do similar things and shake things up the same as us. So thanks again for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And Matthew, lastly, over to you.
I think if you're a young person now who's studying and still at university, or thinking of going to university, or thinking of starting working, think about things in the long run. Take a long-term view. Where's the world going to be in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, in 20 years' time? Where you think it's going to be at that point in time, start laying the seeds and foundations now, so you can then take advantage of the way the world is going to be in that point. So, for example, you can see the metaverse and VR has been around VR has been around since the 60s, right? It's not new. The metaverse has been around, you could argue, since when the internet first got turned on. Right? These are not new things. But what's happened has been a convergence of technologies, and then big companies like Facebook looking at it, and all of a sudden it's under this laser focus. Right now, I don't know if anyone's ever been on Decentraland or something like that. It's rubbish. You know, you go on there, the graphics are like what I used to play on computer games when I was 10 years old. You know, so, but that is going to, now that there's all this focus and money going into it, it means that as an industry is going to exponentially, orders of magnitude, grow and increase and improve. So if you want to take advantage of that, you should start looking at how do I use Unity game engine? How do I use, how can I code up using a Microsoft HoloLens? So take a long-term view. I would say experiment and try lots of different things. Don't be a specialist. You know, I'm an entrepreneur, and to be an entrepreneur, you need to be a generalist, right? You need to have lots of skills in lots of different areas. You can complement what you're learning in academia with this tool set of other skills outside of academia, and make sure you do that. And I think it's about, you need to be picking like the right role in the right company, in the right industry. And the right role, having internships and work experience is a really good way to learn about different jobs. With the right company, that is coming to places like work in FinTech and other, like the other people on the call and the services we're providing, we can help show you the opportunities. And the right industry, like I keep banging on about, FinTech and Web3 is the industry to be in. There's no point going anywhere else. It's the thing which is going, the other one may be looking at, VR and technology to support VR and AR and XR, and quantum computing, AI, those things. All of these exponential technologies is where the world is going in the next 10 years. So strap yourself to the right rocket ship and you will go very far.
To me, it's been a tremendously exciting conversation. There's been a lot of talk for a long, long time about dearth of talent, and to see people like you guys taking this and rethinking it, reimagining it, and putting it into a different concept to say, look, this isn't going to change overnight, but to look at a fix that's coming and an opportunity out there to do things differently represents a really interesting area. So guys, thank you so much for joining us on the call today. Thanks so much for all the wisdom, the insight, the thoughts. There's so much more to come up on this. I'm sure it's going to be a series, and we can pick up on all the various other bits and pieces we can do to take it through. We'll put all of your details in this when we post it out. Please do reach out to these change makers in the industry if you're watching at home and have enjoyed it. From me, it's been a massive thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. And guys, thank you for being involved in such an interesting debate. We will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Toby.
Thanks, Toby.